In this video, we're going to learn draggable and droppable. First, we're going to start with the Facebook div and we're going to make it draggable like we did in the previous video. If you remember, all we did was to select the elements using its ID, and then we used a method. So this method, if you remember, it was draggable. And now if we save and we refresh the page, we can see that the Facebook div is draggable. Okay, let's do the same thing for the Apple div. Okay, let's make sure it's working. Yes. Now we want to be able to drag the Apple div, but only following one axis. We want to drag it following the Y axis only, not following the X axis. So in this case, we're going to use an option inside the method. First of all, to use an option, we need curly brackets. And then inside the curly brackets, we're going to tell the name of the option. In our case, it's going to be axis. And we are setting it to Y. All right. So let's try. We can see that now the Apple div is draggable only following the Y axis. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move to the Microsoft's div. First of all, let's make it draggable using its ID. Okay. Okay, let's make sure it's working. Now we want to be able to drag the element, and also when we drop it, we want it to revert to its original place. So you might guess the option we need to use in this case. So first of all, we need curly brackets, and we need to use an option. It's called revert. Okay, and we need to set it to true. So let's try now. It's working. So if we drag the element anywhere, it just goes back to where it was. All right. Now we're going to go to some advanced stuff. So we want to execute a piece of code once we start the dragging. Okay. And also, while we're dragging the elements, we want to be executing another piece of code. And also when we stop, we drop the elements, we want to execute another piece of code. So how are we going to do that? So there are options we need to use here. The first one is going to be start. So first, to separate the options, we need a comma. Okay. So next one is start, and we need to define a function. Okay. So in this case, let's say once we start the dragging of the elements, we just want so once we start dragging the Microsoft div, we want the Facebook div to change its background color, for example. Okay. So let's just select the Microsoft div using its ID and change its background color using the CSS method. Okay, and let's go for a certain color. Let's go for something like that. Okay. So we can try that and make sure it is working. So once we start the dragging action, we can see that the color of Facebook changes. Okay, so the next option is drag. Okay. But before we do that, we need to separate the options using the comma, as we said. So a comma at the end of the option. So now when we are dragging the Microsoft div, we want to change the color of the background color of the Microsoft div itself to a random color. Okay, so first we're defining a function, and we'll put the code inside the curly brackets. So we're going to be selecting the Microsoft div using its ID. Okay. And then we're going to use the CSS method. Okay, and we are looking at the background color to be changed to a random color. So before we go for a random color, let's just go for a specific color to make sure our code is working, and then we can move to something else. Okay. Okay, so it is working. We can see that the color of Microsoft has changed. And now to go for a random color, we will just use the same code we used earlier when we were doing select HTML elements. Okay, let's refresh our live preview. It was okay, it was in change HTML styling, and we did that with the Apple div when we were changing randomly the color of the Apple div, and we used the RGB function. Okay, so let's copy all this piece of code just to save some time. Okay. Okay, let's make sure this is working. So if we drag the element now, we can see that every time we move the element, the color changes. All right. Okay. Okay, and now finally we're going to add another option. So this one is going to be the stop option. Okay, and what we want to do here is we're going to define another function, and let's say, for example, we want the background color of the Apple div to change. So let's select the Apple div using its ID, and let's use the CSS method. Okay, we're looking at the background color. Okay, and let's set it to something like that. Okay, so let's try this now. So when we start, we can see that the Facebook div changed, and once we drop it, we can see that the Apple div changed, the background color changed. Okay, we can add something else. We can change the content of the Microsoft div when we are dragging the elements. So for example, let's have a list of strings that we can show once the Microsoft div is being dragged around. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna have an array of potential messages that the div is gonna show in each of the paragraphs. Okay, so for example, if we had only one message, we want both the paragraphs to change to that message. Okay, so for example, if you want to show the message drop me on both paragraphs, it's going to show drop me here and drop me there. Okay, but now what we want to do, we want to change this as we are dragging the element. So we want to show one message, for example, drop me, and then another message come on, and then another message leave me alone, or something like that. So first of all, we're going to define an array of strings, and we're going to call it message. Okay, so for example, the first string could be please, next one could be leave me alone, next one drop me, okay, and next one come on. Okay, and while we're dragging the elements, so we have seen that we're changing the background color to a random color. Okay, but we want to do something else. We want to change all the p elements inside the div to one of these strings. Okay, so we're gonna do, so first of all we need to select the Microsoft div. All right, using its ID, and then we need to find the p elements inside the Microsoft div. So we're going to use a function, it's find, and we are looking for p elements. And once we find those p elements, each one of them, we're going to change its HTML using the HTML method. All right, and now we can, if let's say we want to change the HTML of the paragraph to one specific item in our list. So let's say we want the first item. We're just going to go message item index 0. Okay, and now if we try that, oh, we just forgot the number sign there. So let's try again. So you can see that's both paragraphs, they changed to the string that we selected. Now we want to go for a random number between 0 and 3. So it's going to be either 0, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so we have done this before. So we're going to use the math.random method, and then we're going to multiply it by 4. Okay, so let's go for that. So rather than having a specific number, we're going to use math.random. So now we're getting a number between 0 and 1. So we're going to multiply it by 4 so that we can get something between 0 and 4. So multiply by 4. And then we're going to select all this and put it inside another method because we want a round number. So we're going to use the math.floor method. So we're going to copy that and use the math.floor method and paste our code there. So let's try now and see if it works. Yes, it's working. So you can see now that as we are dragging the elements, we can see all those messages being shown. Okay. Okay, let's add one final bit. So let's say once we drop the elements, we change the content of the div to only one paragraph, saying, for example, finally. Okay. So we're going to go to this top option and we're going to add another statement. We're going to be accessing the Microsoft div using its ID. And this time, we'll just change the HTML of the Microsoft div. Okay. Okay, let's change the HTML to a paragraph saying, for example, finally. So let's try. So now we're dragging the elements, so the color changes randomly, and also we're showing some text in both paragraphs. If we drop the element, now the content changed to only one paragraph. If we drag it again, now we have only one paragraph inside, and we're changing the contents of only one paragraph. All right? Great. Okay. Now we're going to move to something else. We're going to move to droppable. So an element will be droppable if we are able to drag another element and drop it inside that element. All right. So let's create another div following the Microsoft div. Okay. Let's give it an ID, draggable, droppable. It looks like I've already included the styling of these elements. So we just have now a background color, a height and width for that droppable element. Okay. And also we're just going to add another class to the element. Okay. It's going to be similar to the other divs. we're just gonna add the UI corner all so that we can have all the corners around it. Let's have some margin top 20 pixels, for example. Okay, that looks better. So let's add some text. You can drop elements or drop things here. Okay, and also let's change the color. Let's change the color to white. That looks better. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to make these elements droppable. So similar to what we have done before, the function is, you can guess what method we're going to be using. So first let's select the elements using its ID, droppable, and the method is going to be droppable. Okay. So basically if we refresh the page and if we select the Facebook div, we can actually drop it there. Okay. The Microsoft div can be actually dropped, but it reverts to its original position. But we can see that all the other elements, they can be just dropped there. Now we're gonna add some properties to the droppable method. So we can specify which elements can be dropped. The option we need to use there is going to be accept, and we can specify which elements can be dropped. Before we go for that, let's just specify what happens when we drop an element, just to make sure we know whether it had dropped or not. So the option here is going to be drop, okay, and we need to specify a function. So let's go for an easy function. So we're just gonna say, for example, okay, once an element is dropped, we can just specify, so we can select the same, we can select the droppable elements using the keyword this, okay, and we can just change its background color using the CSS method. Okay, and let's go for a color, for example, that one. Okay, so if we take, for instance, the Facebook div and we drag it there, we can see that the background color of the droppable elements has changed. Okay, now we can add another option specifying which elements we accept. So let's say we only accept the Facebook div to be dropped. Okay, so basically we need the accept option, and we're going to specify the Facebook div using its ID. So we need to have a comma and then have the new option, which is accept. Okay, so now let's see. So let's try the Apple div. So we cannot drop it, we can't see any effects there. If we try the Microsoft div, we can't drop it either. But if we try the Facebook div, we can drop it and we can see the effects happening. Okay.